guys, welcome back to our final installment. It's been a long semester, and I'm Pastor Zac, and this is Pastor Mark. And today we're looking back on the book of Proverbs and the things that we've learned throughout this, I think 15 or 16 lessons that we've done on this book. And so we're sort of just going to reflect on some of the main things that Mark and I have learned, and things that have been helpful for us throughout our life. And then at the very end, we'll look at how Proverbs fits in with the rest of the wisdom literature and with the rest of the Old Testament in general. So we'll look at that first question. What were some lessons that, as we've gone through it, have been really helpful and powerful for us as reminders, or maybe new things that we've learned along the way?
Yeah, the first one that stands out in my mind is the command to seek wisdom and to strive after it, to be hungry for it. Often in my preaching and in my thinking, I'm hungry. I talk about being hungry for righteousness and doing the right thing, peace, being hungry for more faith, but sometimes wisdom can escape that target, and so Proverbs has just been great in showing the benefit of being hungry for wisdom. It's not just about having it, but continuing to be hungry for it is one of the instructions of Proverbs. And so I have appreciated that. As you're just reading more and more of Proverbs, it's sort of a funny thing in that the more you read it, the more you actually get hungry for it. And even though you're satisfied by the truth that you find and the wisdom that you find here, the more you realize, wow, I really needed this and I need more of it, and I'm going to seek more of it. And so I think that's the heart of the book of Proverbs. That's in Solomon's heart in teaching his son, is not just to dispense knowledge and to dispense pithy sayings for him to follow, right, but to encourage him to desire it and be hungry for it. So, that's good.
Yeah, that's really good. Your heart longing for more and more wisdom, pursuing wisdom. That sort of fits with what stood out to me, and is really the main reason I wanted to do this series in the first place, is that high schoolers and young people in general, so myself included, I guess, are learning how to navigate the complex issues of life. And something that I've found is that wisdom is God's way of helping us to do that. It's His gift to us. So for me, it's been learning the value of wisdom. Just a few weeks ago, I purchased a handheld vacuum. It's the first one I've owned at my house that I've lived in for now 2 years. And I didn't realize till I bought it how much I love this thing and value this thing. I didn't even know that I needed it. But now that I have it, I can't imagine not having it, right? It's this really helpful thing to have just a simple handheld vacuum to go suck up different things off the ground or the couch or whatever. And it's been really nice. I didn't realize how valuable it was. And in the same way, wisdom is something that we often don't realize the value of until we have it. As we're getting through the complex issues of life, there are certain things that maybe are on the horizon for you, decisions that have to be made, or things that are stressing you out. One thing for me recently has been medical bills for the surgery I had back in November, and trying to figure out how to navigate this situation with my medical stuff. That's been sort of something that's been giving me a lot of stress, but I know that God gives me His wisdom, and I don't have to fear that. I can walk confidently in what the Lord is teaching me through this whole situation. And so it's given me a sort of sense of ease, knowing that wisdom is provided for me. So this reminds me of the first chapter of Proverbs. The very end, Proverbs, again, personified as a woman, she's calling out, and she says this: "For the simple are killed by their turning away, and the complacency of fools destroys them. But whoever listens to me," that is, whoever listens to wisdom, "will dwell secure and will be at ease without dread of disaster." So dwelling secure, being at ease without dread of disaster, because God gives us wisdom. So if we value it rightly and we pursue it rightly, we can get through life in a way that will be generally better for us and will bring more blessing and enjoyment and peace. So that's one thing that's been big for me. Do you have any other things?
Yeah, along with that, I mean, to be more specific, I really love Proverbs 15, which talks about how we communicate and how we deal with anger in particular. And so Proverbs 15 verse 1 says, "A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. The tongue of the wise commends knowledge, but the mouth of the fool gushes folly." And in verse 4 as well, "The tongue that brings healing is a tree of life, but a deceitful tongue crushes the spirit." And so this is about how we use words, and maybe a short story of how this has impacted me when it was on the forefront of my mind and really kind of saving me some grief. Was I recently received some criticism that I felt wasn't very fair from somebody over an email, somebody who isn't a part of our church right now, but had sent me an email because they had watched something on the live stream that they didn't really like very much what I had said. And so my initial reaction was the foolish reaction, actually, was to give a harsh word in response. "How dare you? I don't really have a relationship with you anymore, and so I don't really want to be criticized by you because it doesn't really feel like you love me at all." And so thinking, though, instead of Proverbs 15 verse 1, that a gentle answer will help this person. And so instead of thinking the revenge I could exact on them, I was thinking, because of Proverbs, how could I actually help them to maybe deal with an issue that they're going through? And so I actually responded that I would take their advice into consideration and try to do a little bit better. And then he actually responded to that email saying, with a much kinder tone. And I wouldn't say that we are like best of friends all of a sudden, but at the same time, it just went in a better direction than it otherwise would have if I would have given a harsh word. And so I could see there that actually living in this way and memorizing Proverbs 15 verse 1, which was on the forefront of my mind, helped me in that scenario to stop, to consider what God's way was, and living out what he wanted to flourish a little bit more in that relationship and in my life.
Yeah, so that takes a little bit of humility then, because in your pride, your pride may get hurt.
Yeah, my pride was hurt. My pride was hurt by
and
that.
so then you want to respond out of that pride, but Proverbs is all about humility, fearing the Lord properly, and living life under his authority, and knowing that as a Christian, I shouldn't respond in this way. I should respond with humility for this person, even though my pride is hurt. Another thing that has really stood out to me along the way was back to our lesson. It was actually our last youth group night before the lockdown came. I think it was early March 11th. It was about anxiety. And Proverbs 12:25 says, "Anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down, but a good word makes him glad." I love that verse. Anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down. Yes, we've probably all felt that. But a good word makes him glad. Often I think of this as being the gospel, and often we will think, but the gospel doesn't cheer me up right now. The gospel doesn't do it for me. I'm feeling very depressed and anxious, and knowing that God has conquered all, and he's the king of the universe, and he has died for my sin, and that I'm forgiven, that's not really enough right now. And if that is our approach to the gospel, then I would say we've not truly understood the good word of the gospel. That we've not really allowed for the good word of the gospel to sink deeply into our hearts so that it affects and speaks even to our deepest anxieties. And so this should be an encouragement on the one hand, if you are feeling anxious, that's okay to be anxious, but also it's an encouragement to listen to deeply what the gospel says to us and what it means for us. Not just in eternity when we will one day be with Jesus, although that is a part of the good news, the hope that we will be with Christ forever. But we should allow the good news of the gospel to sink in now, to learn how it affects even our anxieties in the here and now. And that's not going to make your anxieties just go away overnight, but it will help you to fight them and to overcome them and not let them overcome you. And that's been really helpful for me, and I know for Bailey as well. We've talked about this verse a good bit.
Martin Lloyd-Jones said, the most important person to preach the gospel to is yourself. Right? And so just hearing the gospel, saying, before you start to think, oh, I know someone who needs this, you're thinking, how is this challenging me or comforting me? It will often do both simultaneously. And I like that little saying, and I think it fits right in line with Proverbs.
Yeah. So then the next question, then, after we've looked at what has stood out to us as we've studied through it the last few months, the question then that I put towards Mark was, speaking to young people in particular, how has Proverbs been helpful for us in our past as we were growing up and getting through the difficulties of life? So one that stands out to me is from Proverbs 26. It's verse 11. It's a simple verse. It's like a dog returns to its vomit, so a fool returns to his folly. And so this one is one that stood out to me when I was in high school. I was involved in a relationship with a girl for several years who didn't treat me well. The relationship sort of was on and off again all the way into college for a few years. And eventually I realized that this girl is mistreating me, and I keep going back to her. And so this verse was helpful for me as I read it early in college, and was just sort of awakened to the fact that I was like a dog returning to his vomit. I kept going back to the thing that was hurting me and was drawing me away from the Lord, and wasn't helpful for me in so many ways. And so that verse, learning the stupidity of going back to the same stupid thing again and again, was really helpful for me at a pivotal time in my life.
Yeah.
What about you?
It's similar in the regard that it has to do with the kind of woman that the Bible says a Christian man should be attracted to, and Proverbs has probably the most specific description in the whole Bible about the kind of woman that a Christian man should flee from, Dame Folly, who stands on the street corner and is bold and brash and maybe very physically attractive, but going her way is disaster. Compared to the woman in Proverbs 31, and also the lady wisdom in what is it, 7 or 8 or something? 8, and that woman is a caretaker, is a woman who is obviously wise and obviously has noble character. And I wouldn't say that it's not as though Pam, like I had this decision before me where there was this foolish woman and then there was Pam to choose between. Like, that's not what happened in my life. But here's how it has impacted me, in that whenever I read that text, I'm thankful for the noble character of my wife. And so what that ends up doing is strengthening my relationship with my wife. And because I'm finding all kinds of things. I'm going through Proverbs 31, which we read as a family on Mother's Day, and I'm noticing this is Pam. And so I'm thankful to God, and I'm more content in my marriage all of a sudden because He's blessed me with this woman who is so, who has so much integrity and who is so thoughtful and caring and hardworking, right? That's a huge factor actually in Psalm 31, or Proverbs 31 is finding a woman who works hard, whose hands are productive and they never tire, I think it says in Proverbs 31. And so it's not just about decision making in Proverbs, but hopefully you can also look back on your life and say, yeah, where I have lived this way and where I have desired what God wants me to desire, it has gone really well for me. And so in that regard, I would say it's gone well for me because the Lord has given me an attraction to Pam, who is a woman of noble character.
Yeah. And so and for all the you young ladies who are listening to this, find a man who praises you, who affirms you, who encourages you.
For those reasons.
Yeah, for those reasons.
Not just for the Dame Folly stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's hugely influential.
You can see the sort of love and appreciation and praise in Proverbs 31. And so often I know young girls will read Proverbs 31 sort of as this impossible, idealistic view of what a woman should be. And it can feel like a lot of pressure to live up to that. And so they look, well, where's the Proverbs 32 chapter on what a wise man should look like? And though it's not given, and you may think that that's unfortunate, I think
much of the rest of the book.
The rest of the book is telling a man how to live his life. It's written again from a father to a son. Yeah. But you also want to be finding a man who does that, who cares for you enough to encourage you and praise you. So this is a convicting thing for me to do with my wife, to praise her and encourage her in the ways that I see her living up to this. And is she perfect? No. And am I perfect? No. And so I can still praise her. I can still appreciate her, and I still need to do that. So find someone who does that for you. Another verse that's been helpful for me, or passage that's been helpful for me from Proverbs, as we've just said, Proverbs 7, the seductress, the warning against being seduced into sexual sin. And this has been a part of my sort of life story in different times and periods about being tempted towards pornography and that sort of thing. And one of the helpful things for me was learning the depth of this sin and where it will lead me and where I don't want to go. And so Proverbs 7 ends that chapter saying this: "And now, O sons, listen to me, and be attentive to the words of my mouth. Let not your heart turn aside to her ways. Do not stray into her paths." And here's the reason: "For many a victim she has laid low, and all her slain are a mighty throng. Her house is the way to Sheol, going down to the chambers of death." And so for me, it was realizing the depth of sin, realizing that this is going to take me to a place that I don't want to go. Wisdom takes me to the place I do want to go. It takes me to a life of fruitfulness and blessing. But folly and sin takes me to a place that will devastate and destroy my life. And so that is the constant precipice that we all live our lives on. Are we going to follow the way of the Spirit or follow the way of the flesh, as Romans chapter 8 talks about? And so that's always been an encouragement to wake up to the badness of sin and don't get seduced into it.
Yeah.
That's not going to be fun. And so run away from that and flee from that. So that's been helpful for me throughout my life.
Yeah, the Heidelberg Catechism uses the word misery a lot, and that's not a word that we like to say anymore. But that's what sin leads to is misery, disaster.
So are you living the good life? Proverbs will help you live the good life, not just a good life, but the good and godly life. And if you are not living that life, you will find yourself living miserably. And that is a huge point throughout the book of Proverbs. So the final question, sort of to wrap this up, now that we've looked all of this whole semester at the book of Proverbs and all of its different teachings, or a lot of its different teachings, maybe not all of its teachings, how does the book of Proverbs fit with the rest of the wisdom literature? So for example, we would include Job and Ecclesiastes, maybe Song of Solomon or Lamentations or certain Psalms even. How does it fit within those books? And then also, how does it fit within the rest of the Old Testament?
Yeah, well, it has a lot to do with my sermon actually from this past Sunday, where I talk about how wisdom literature does not give us the formula by which God is locked into, and if we do X, Y, and Z, then we will have health, wealth, and long life. Some people approach the Bible in general and wisdom literature in particular with that kind of formulaic approach, and that is not, that will lead into misery. In particular, there's a verse in the Proverbs that say, "Train a child up in the way he should go, and when he's old he will not depart from it." And so some people would say that is a formula for making my kid a Christian.
Yep.
And so that would be a law mentality to a wisdom text. Certainly it is a law, actually. Train a child up in the way he should go or she should go, and that's the responsibility of the parent. But then it is really up to the Lord whether they depart from it or not. And hopefully and typically when a child is trained up well in the way that he should go, in the sense that he's learning how to love, he's learning how to value the truth and work hard and do what's right. Generally speaking, that child would want to live in a relationship with the Lord, and it's been modeled how beautiful it is to him or her. But it's still wisdom, because it doesn't automatically guarantee a certain outcome. And at times, many Christians fall into this trap of either saying, well, it's all mystery, and so we should just pray about it, and I don't really know what's going to happen in life, and let's just not plan so much as trust God, right? Now, that's actually a rejection of wisdom literature, which teaches you, no, do these things and life will go well for you in the spiritual sense. But that also rejects the other trap, which says, if you do these 4 things, then God has to respond in this exact way, giving you an easy life, basically. And that's not what wisdom literature promises either. And so whether it's Job, who has friends who come and tell him that, oh, Job, you broke the equation, and so you must have done something wrong to get the wrong answer at the end of the equation. And Job's like, no, I know that I've sought the Lord, I'm righteous before God. And so that's why Job is the wisdom literature, because it makes us wrestle with the equation a little bit.
Exactly.
And at times God acts mysteriously, like from my text in Mark 4, where the man plants the seed, and the Bible says, though he does not know how it grows, and there's mystery involved in the workings of God and the will of God. But at the same time, we're called to plant the seed and to try to live wisely and try to do what's right, like Job had done, like Solomon commands us to do in Proverbs and Ecclesiastes.
Yeah. There's not much more I think I need to add to that. I guess I could simplify or boil that down to the point that Proverbs gives the general rule that generally, when you do well, you will live well, generally. Job is sort of then a dramatic illustration of that. It's a dramatized illustration of the generally word, because generally that's supposed to happen. Generally you live with wisdom, life will go well with you. Job says, not so much. Generally that's the case, yes, says Job, but you can live well, do and be righteous, at least in a sense, as Job is claimed to be, and it may not go perfectly well. So there's sort of the exception there to that word generally. If you read Proverbs as a law, you will be reading it wrong. Proverbs is meant to be read with that word generally in mind. So generally, when you raise up a child, in the Lord, they shouldn't depart from that. Generally, they won't, right? Maybe that we could look at some statistics or something on that. Maybe that would be a little bit too flattened of a view of that. But generally, that there's truth there.
Or like in my example of a gentle word turns away wrath. It doesn't always. Yeah, sometimes if you respond in gentleness to somebody who's like coming at you, they're going to keep coming at you, and they're going to hate you anyways. Right? Yeah. And so generally, it really helps to be gentle. Job
is an exploration of that generally theme being stretched, and it's showing that all the Proverbs aren't always exactly accurate. Not that the Proverbs isn't accurate, but that there are exceptions. And then Ecclesiastes is sort of a book that says yes, but. So Ecclesiastes often agrees with the general themes of Proverbs, that wisdom is valuable, wisdom will help you, wisdom is good to have, but then it will also add buts. It may not always be perfectly valuable, or it almost sort of reads as if it's a jaded old man looking down at a young 18-year-old kid who's excited going out into the world, and it's like, yes, you should be excited for the world, but keep these things in mind. And that's sort of how Ecclesiastes reads. And so one example is Ecclesiastes says a wise man may build an amazing thing, but it may get destroyed in one generation, or he may earn a lot of money, but he may lose it in one bad business venture. He may work hard all of his life acquiring his income the way he should, being careful, being wise, and then one day he loses everything. Or maybe he gets in an accident and he can't even enjoy all that he has. He gets hit in the head and he's now no longer there anymore, and he can't enjoy it anymore. So that there are exceptions to these rules. So those other books help expand our understanding of the value of wisdom, and it shows sort of the limitations of it as well. But the general theme is kept up, that wisdom is good. And Job shows us, and this is where I'll end, I think. Job shows us that even when we don't get the blessing we think we deserve, we ought to be faithful to God and we ought to be looking forward to the Redeemer, seeing him in our flesh. Job 19, he talks about, even though I may die, my flesh may rot, I will see my Redeemer in my flesh. And that is the hope of Job all throughout, even though he can't understand what's going on, he can't explain it. He knows that there's a need for him to continue believing and trusting in the Lord's goodness to him. And at the end of the book, he repents sort of his doubt a little bit. He sort of backpedals on that and says, I'm sorry, I should trust you as the sovereign Lord of the universe. And so that's, again, back to that theme of fearing God and trusting in him, even when life doesn't seem to make sense. And so now that we've come to the end of this whole series, we really hope that you guys have benefited from this, maybe in big ways or even in small ways, of learning wisdom for your life. Hopefully it's been practical and helpful, and that as you continue to grow and go into your summer now and into your next school years, I know for Hannah and some others that you may be going off to college or off into the unknown beyond high school, we hope that you live with wisdom and you continue, as Mark said at the beginning, to seek after it, to pursue it, to make it your life's goal to pursue the Lord's wisdom, because pursuing the Lord is a pursuit of wisdom. So take care, you guys. We love you, and we'll see you at youth group.
See you guys.